Look at your hand, the one you'd use to sign your name. You didn't choose it. There was no moment where you sat down and picked. It was just already yours. Before school, before you could talk, before you were even born. About 90% of people on Earth reach with the right hand. The other 10% reach with the left, and almost nobody can tell you why. Here's the strange part. The hand you trust most was decided in the dark, by something that wasn't quite you yet. So why are you the way you are? Start with what it isn't. It isn't a habit. It isn't something you picked up. You weren't trained into it. We know this because we can watch it happen. Before birth, in 1991, a researcher named Peter Hepper pointed an ultrasound at fetuses in the womb. He watched them suck their thumbs. And the bias was already there. About 90% of them sucked the right thumb. Around 10% chose the left. The same split you see in the world, already showing up at 15 weeks. Then he pushed it earlier. In 1998, he watched arm movements at just 10 weeks. The fetuses moved the right arm more than the left. That's the earliest moment those movements can even be seen. Sit with that for a second. At 10 weeks, the brain isn't really wired yet. There's barely a brain to do the choosing, and the body is already leaning right. But the real proof came later. Hepper tracked 75 of those babies for over a decade. He waited until they were 10, 12 years old, then he checked which hand they actually used. 60 of them turned out right-handed. And all 60 had sucked the right thumb in the womb. Every single one, the hand they'd use for the rest of their lives, already locked, months before they had a life. So why does the body lean at all? Because you are cross-wired. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. The right side of your brain controls the left. In most people, the left hemisphere runs the show for fine control, so the right hand wins. That same left hemisphere, in most people, is also where language lives. Speaking, reaching, both leaning the same way, from the same side. Your handedness isn't really about your hand, it's a shadow, cast by which half of your brain took charge. So what decides which half takes charge? The obvious answer is the one you're already thinking. It's genetic. You inherited it. And there's real weight behind that. In 2024, scientists scanned the genes of more than 350,000 people. They published it in Nature Communications. They found rare variants of a gene called TUBB4B that show up more often in left-handed people. TUBB4B helps build microtubules. Think of them as tiny scaffolding inside your cells. That scaffolding also shapes cilia, little hair-like paddles that push fluid around in the developing embryo. The theory goes like this. That fluid flow, early on, may be what tips the whole brain slightly to one side. A current, setting a direction. In the dark, so it's in your DNA. Case closed. Well, not quite. Because here's where it falls apart. Genes only explain about a quarter of it, roughly 25%. The other 75% is something else. And we know genes aren't the whole story for one stubborn reason. Identical twins. Identical twins share the same DNA, the exact same code. And yet they often don't share the same hand. One reaches right, the other reaches left. Same genes. Different answer. There's no single lefty gene. There are hundreds of genes, each nudging by a tiny amount. And then, on top of all of them, there's chance. Scientists actually built that into the math. One model says you don't inherit a hand at all. You inherit a tendency. And if that tendency doesn't fire, the choice gets made randomly. A coin flip in the womb. So part of you was written by your parents, and part of you was just rolled, like dice nobody was watching. The hand you've used every day of your life might come down to a flip of something that left no record at all. So step back. Way back. If it's partly random, why isn't the world split evenly? Why does it tilt so hard to the right? And why has it stayed tilted? For the answer, you have to dig. Literally. David Freyer is an anthropologist at the University of Kansas. He studies teeth. Ancient ones. And he found something hiding on the front teeth of early humans. Scratches. Tiny diagonal marks on the lip side of the teeth. Here's how they got there. Early humans used their mouths as a third hand. They'd grip a piece of hide in their teeth, pull it tight with one hand, and cut with the other. Every so often, the stone tool slipped and raked across the front teeth. And the angle of that scratch tells you which hand held the blade. Freyer looked at teeth from Cima de los Huesos, a cave in Spain. over 500,000 years old. He looked at a jaw from Tanzania, around 1.8 million years old. He looked at Neanderthals across Europe. The marks pointed the same way. 16 of 18 Neanderthals were right-handed. The split was about 9-1, the same 9-1 you have today. Read that again. For 500,000 years, this ratio has barely moved. Through the Ice Age, through the rise of language, through every empire and every collapse. The same 9 righties for every lefty. Holding. And remember what right-handedness is tied to. The left brain. Language. So when Freire saw those right-handed scratches, he saw something bigger. A clue that creatures 500,000 years ago may have already been built for speech. The scratch on a tooth. Whispering that they could probably talk. But that leaves the hardest question of all. If right-handedness is the winning trait, if it's tied to language, to a brain that works, then why are there any lefties left? A trait that rare, that costly, should have been erased. Left-handedness even shows up a little more often alongside certain conditions. By every normal rule of survival, it should have faded out. It didn't. It's still here. Stubbornly, exactly 10%. In 1996, a researcher named Michael Raymond offered an answer. He called it the fighting hypothesis. It goes like this. In a world full of right-handers, everyone learns to fight right-handers. You expect the blow to come from that side. You're ready for it. And then a lefty steps up. Everything comes from the wrong direction, the unfamiliar angle, the surprise. The rarer the lefty, the bigger the shock. It sounds like a story. So they checked. In 2019, scientists studied over 13,800 professional fighters. Boxers, mixed martial artists, men and women, the lefties won more. You see it everywhere rarity meets combat. Fencing, boxing, baseball. In one isolated society with a brutally high rate of violence, the rate of left-handers climbed past 20%. It's not that being a lefty makes you better, it's that being rare makes you dangerous. That's why you still exist, lefties. Not in spite of being outnumbered, because of it. The trait that should have vanished survived for the oldest reason there is. In a world that all leans one way, being the exception is a weapon. So look at your hand again. You didn't pick it, your parents handed you part of it. A coin flip handed you the rest. And underneath all of that runs a current 500,000 years old. Older than language. Older than your species, really. A 9-1 tilt that has outlasted everything, and somehow ended in you. The hand you'll use to wave goodbye. To hold someone, to write the last thing you ever write, chosen in the dark by something that was never quite you, and you've been following its lead your whole life, without ever once deciding to.